That is not Abigail Adams. This is Abigail Adams.
So the clip that you just saw shows some of the images that have been uploaded to the White House's new website celebrating the women of the American Revolution. And they are emblematic of a wider problem on the internet, which is AI historical content. Let me show you some examples and why I think they're harmful. So this is a screenshot of a AI video on Instagram depicting the life of Mary Tudor, Queen of France. As you can see, this is an AI creation of an Instagram model. Mary Tudor did have red hair, but I think really that's about the only thing that it gets right. None of the styling reflects the time period. Um, and I think this sort of depiction of female historical figures is emblematic of the current cultural climate, where this face is the face, you know? All the Instagram models will look like this. Most of the AI depictions of women look a lot like this. It's like a singular face, lip filler, brow lift. And to me, it's kind of disgusting that we are retconning history in this way. It's not only inaccurate, but we can't even let female historical figures like Mary Tudor, who went through. We can't even let female historical figures who were brilliant in a number of ways be average looking. They have to look like Instagram models to capture the modern imagination, which I think is gross. This woman lived through a lot of shit, and she was incredibly strong. Why do we have to depict her as an Instagram model for her to be interesting or appealing to a modern audience? Now, I will admit this doesn't only apply to women, although I see it being applied to women more often than to men, but this is supposedly Charles Brandon. Let me show you a portrait of Mary and Charles. Do you see any resemblance? Because I don't. And even when we are creating depictions that feel more grounded, there's still a level of historical inaccuracy or a kind of narrative building that is not representative of the facts. So this is an AI recreation of Catherine Howard, and this particular image is based off of a miniature that we cannot positively identify as Catherine Howard. But this video makes no mention of that in the comments or in any of the video itself. Really, the only reason that the miniature is often said to be Catherine is because of the necklace that she's wearing. It's the Queen Consort necklace. But I think the miniature that this image is based on more likely depicts Anne of Cleves rather than Catherine Howard because it looks much older than a 17 to 19-year-old girl. Another similar type of video, this is supposed to be a historian's recreation of Catherine Howard. Again, this is based on a portrait that we cannot positively identify as Catherine Howard. I believe this is the portrait of an unknown lady at the Met. But again, the video and the caption did not mention that we don't know for sure that this is what Catherine looked like. So these videos are sort of claiming that you're looking at the real face of this historical figure without actually being able to verify that in any sort of way. So this video is obviously AI generated. It discusses which of Henry's wives were the prettiest. And here it states that Jane Seymour was supposed to be beautiful for her time period, which is not true. She was actually called plain and was what the Victorians would consider a spinster. There's Catherine Howard. And I'd like to introduce you to these women in a way that is more genuine than what you were seeing here. So my main grievance with the type of video that I just showed you is that it focuses on such a menial aspect of who these women were. And I see that even with the non-AI generated video history accounts on Instagram, the fact accounts, they like to post about when it comes to women's history specifically, this is what I see them posting about, and it's mainly only this. The most beautiful women from each century or whatever time period, and the most brutal female leaders. So the only aspects that these accounts are discussing about female historical figures is either their beauty or their villainy, and we can see how that whittles a woman down to a one-dimensional figure. So let me actually introduce you to the woman that the previous video was depicting. So this is Jane Seymour. Jane Seymour was the third wife of Henry VIII. We don't actually know much about Jane, other than that she was kind of old for the time when she married Henry. I believe she was 24. She was not considered a beauty in her time period. She did have blonde hair and a pale complexion, which were the beauty standard, but she was also kind of described as too pale almost, and like I said, plain. She was fond of embroidery though, and she was really good at it. She gave birth to Henry's only son, only legitimate son, Edward, and she died shortly after. Some say of childbed fever, but it's hard to know exactly what ailment took her from this world. But she was described as gentle, sweet, pious, but she was also clever because you had to be clever to survive at the court of Henry VIII. So that's Jane. Before Jane, we have Henry VIII's second wife, Anne. Anne was not considered a beauty for her time period. She was supposedly olive complected with dark, shining eyes and dark hair. This is my favorite portrait, supposedly, of Anne. It's created later, but I see Elizabeth in this portrait, her daughter, so I like to think that this is a fairly accurate depiction of Anne. I got to see this at the National Portrait Gallery in London, and it's stunning in person. It feels alive because it's painted on a curved surface. Anne was incredibly clever, witty, worldly, because she served at the French court before returning to England, and she was a religious reformer, and she didn't deserve to die. Now historians largely think the charges brought against her were false, made so that Henry could dispatch her and marry Jane Seymour. But yes, Anne was incredibly clever. She enjoyed falconry, she enjoyed hunting, writing. She was a real Renaissance woman, and yeah, you all probably know about her already. This is Catherine Howard, supposedly two potential portraits of her. This is an X-ray of the Met one. I chose the X-ray because her mouth has been changed in the final, and I think this one more accurately depicts a young girl, which is what she was. When she married Henry VIII, she was 17. Before this, she had been living in the household of her step-grandma, who kind of had a bunch of wards, and they kind of ran wild under her supervision. Catherine, unfortunately, was, some people don't want to use the word groomed, but I would say groomed, because she entered two relationships when she was 12 and 14, respectively, with men who worked in her step-grandmother's household. But Catherine was said to be lively, vivacious. She likely enjoyed dancing, and she was a good queen consort at first, until she fell in love with someone who was a bit more age-appropriate for her, Thomas Culpeper, and she did stray from her marriage. But I can't blame her for that. I really can't. If you'd like to learn more about her, I'd recommend Young, Damned, and Fair by Gareth Russell's a fantastic book.
The truth is that we've mythologized female historical figures for thousands of years. We've put them in boxes, categorized them, stripped their stories until they're one-dimensional caricatures. Witches, seductresses, madwomen, mothers, or martyrs. We are continuing to obscure their lives even now, behind the glossy, filtered faces of AI images, which do so little to reflect the complexities, trials, and triumphs of the women who persevered through some of history's most turbulent times. Thank you guys for watching, and if you'd like more videos on history, please give me a follow.